Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is a show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you have better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at Twit TV.
This is Twit. All right. I think you probably were all on macOS Catalina beta, the public beta. I was on my laptop, but our desktops got Catalina. macOS 10.15 came out yesterday, and I think today we could just spend some time touring through it. There is a lot of difference. Let's start with iTunes. Gone.
What is that?
Gone.
What now?
Gone.
Yeah.
I had a caller.
Mr. Stark. Mr. Stark.
I had a caller
I don't want to go
on the radio show saying, "What do I do now?"
It got snapped.
Well, you do it without iTunes, because iTunes has gone to that land of ghosts and winds. Yeah, which comes with like the first warning that if you are still syncing stuff via iTunes, hold off in Catalina for a while until you have you've listened to shows like this and been on message boards to find out exactly how like your old iPod Touch or your older iPhone or whatever interacts with it. I've already had one person on Twitter, and actually I also had a problem doing a sync, because the first thing I was checking out last night was really like, what is life without iTunes going to be like? And there are going to be like major adjustments. If you are in that minority of people for whom iTunes was a useful tool, and unfortunately I am one of those people, there are going to be some major adjustments, and you might not find compatibility just right yet.
So, okay. I mean, Apple's been moving us to Wi-Fi syncing and Wi-Fi backup for a long time on iOS. But I still think the fastest way, when you get a new iPhone, the fastest way to get it set up is take the old iPhone, connect it via a USB cable to a Mac, back it up, make sure it's an encrypted backup, use a password so all your passwords get backed up, and then restore it to the new phone. And that's easily the fastest way to do it. I could still do that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you just don't get to do it through iTunes anymore, because iTunes is now divided out into multiple apps. It's all in Finder, which makes complete sense now that it's not, the iPhone isn't the iPod, so it's not your music device. It's your mini computer.
Yeah.
So plugging it in and having it pop up in Finder makes a lot more sense now. So and the great thing is that once you connect it, you connect your phone, your iPhone to your Mac, and then you open a Finder window, and once you click on your phone, that interface looks exactly the same as it did when it was on iTunes.
They did zero work on that.
They did zero. It's taken directly from iTunes, so you can see there's the backups button, the encrypt local backup.
Is that meant to like shame you? Like they give you a 1980s interface so that they're trying to tell you it's time to move on? I don't know.
This is from Andrew Cunningham's, Ars Technica 8,000 word article, and I noticed for some reason Andrew's still using a 4S. And his battery is down at 7%.
You only did 8,000 words?
I didn't count. I have no idea. It's probably longer. So that's good. And so you can also do the updates this way. That's not changed. It's very much
exactly. I think it's good that they left that interface exactly the same. Like maybe it'll be nice for them to change eventually, but they gave us a big change as it is by moving away from iTunes and putting this interface in Finder. So if they would have changed that interface too, I think a lot of us would have been like, "What do I do?" But you get this.
Where's my carbon?
This sense of comfort. Yeah, you get a sense of comfort as soon as you click into that window and you go, oh, okay, this is good. Everything is exactly the way it should be. It's just in a different room now. It's really nice to kind of have that comfort level when you click into it. It's not scary at all.
It does make sense that music is now not in iTunes, but in music. That's a logical place to put it, and that's where you would get Apple Music. That's where your songs would show up. I presume that when I do the Finder sync, it's going to sync music the same way it did before.
There's a tab, yeah.
So that hasn't changed, and it still has the player, and all of the mini player is still there, so you haven't lost that. In fact, I was surprised. I didn't realize that it was in there still, but there is still the visualizer. So if you are like trippy visuals on your Apple Macintosh screen while you're listening to music, you can still do that.
You can still rip CDs and you can still encode stuff, just like you can code your podcast like it was 1990 still.
So you do that in music, though?
Yes.
That's in the music thing. Same thing with media sharing. So that's the one thing that's going to be a little tricky is figuring out which of these apps you're going to go to do what you want to do.
The only thing that's gone is XML.
XML's gone. What is XML?
The stuff you used to be able to export it, and then DJs would import it to do a whole bunch of fancy
Apple warned DJs not to upgrade to Catalina because you won't be able to export your playlists anymore to XML. So that'll happen eventually. It's
the XML part won't, but the functionality will return in a way that's no longer XML dependent.
So your DJ app will have to be smarter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everything will have to update to the glorious non-XML future.
Okay.
It's not a policy change where they're not allowing people access to data. It's just, they're just making it harder to access it.
Podcasts have their very own app because it is the podcast renaissance.
Could you tell it was a Catalyst app, Leo, when you looked at it? Could you tell it apart?
This is the iOS podcasts?
The iPad podcast app.
iPad OS.
Who knew? You guys knew, of course, because you're so smart. Oh, my God. So they used Catalyst, which is the technology formerly known as Marzipan, the way to take iOS apps and port them so they run natively on the Mac.
UIKit for Mac.
Why rewrite podcasts? I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
So instead of taking the iTunes podcast functionality, you're going to get the iOS podcast functionality.
And the app was much more updated.
Oh yeah.
It's so indistinguishable that even the things that really bother me about the music and TV app navigation are reproduced exactly in the podcast app.
That's pretty funny. The TV app then, is that also Catalyst? Is that TV Plus?
No, that's still iTunes code. So the music and the TV app are old iTunes code. So basically they ripped the tabs out, slapped them down, and shelled them up so they'd be their own thing, and then gave them a makeover so they'd all look similar. And the podcast app and Find My are the new Catalyst apps.
Okay. So you now have TV, music, podcasts, and syncing lives in Finder. As well as your menu bar, which is
and audiobooks have gone to the Books app.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. So my Audible books or books I buy on the iTunes store now will be played through the iBooks app. That makes sense.
Apple Books now, they got rid of all the eyes. They're murdering all the eyes.
They're murdering the eyes. The eyes are dead. Long live the eyes. Can you still? Family sharing for TV shows is in TV shows. Family sharing for music is in music. Oh, let's not forget, there's also arcade.
Yep.
Games go in arcade. Most of the iOS arcade apps are there, not all.
Yeah, I think they're trying. The ideal is for all of them, but they're not there yet.
And then, of course, you'll be able to use, this is exciting, your Xbox One controller, your PlayStation 4 controller on your Mac now, just as you do on your iPad, to play those games. Or your Apple TV. So that's nice. Okay.
Renee, I'm jumping into almost review style real quick because I'm actually right now looking in the TV app. I hadn't popped into this yet. Renee, you might actually be able to address this better, but I can't seem to find a way to sign in with my current account for anything like Shudder TV, for example. I only see Try It Free, but I already have an account for Shudder. So
do you have a Shudder account in Apple TV, or do you have it separately?
Right, it's separately. So there's no way to sign in to an app on the TV app.
So here's our great pain right now.
Yeah.
It's all still broken and it's all still fiefdoms. And Apple tries as best as it can on iOS to make that seamless because the TV app will shoot you off into other apps. But on macOS, there is no Shudder Catalyst app, for example. There's no Canadian network apps. So it'll just not do anything. It'll just won't be able to play the stuff. And if you subscribe within channels, they don't give you credit for that in the app. And if you subscribe in the app, you're not subscribed within channels because they're separate systems still. So it is a whole lot of pain at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, it's very frustrating. I want to be able to, I'm down with subscribing to something that I don't already have. But for those accounts that I currently have, I would much rather just sign into it. But I can see why
even worse
right
is
now
like if you're outside the US, they have all these different licensing deals. So for example, CBS All Access will think it has a show, but it's really the licensed property of CTV. So when you try to do it on the TV app, it'll just kick you to CTV, and then it'll say, give me your cable login, and you'll say, I don't have cable. That's why I subscribed, moron. And it'll say, well, you can't play it. But on the Mac, it can't kick you anywhere, so you just stay there and burn. It's all fine.
And to add in, so this will work on all Macs from 2012 on, with one exception. To add insult to injury, my trash can Mac cannot be updated.
It can, but you have to hack it. Like you have to go into the forums and read the files you have to get, and sort of like what people have been doing with the cheese grater Mac Pros for years.
The power to be your best.
Oh, I'm so sorry I bought that thing. Can't tell you how sorry I am I bought that.
It's a great media server.
Yeah, except I can't put Catalina on it. My God.
As always, its best feature is as a static object. It's you put it on a shelf,
gorgeous.
you regard it.
Wonderful
It's very
doorstop.
pretty.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was Mac Break Weekly 682. Goodbye to iTunes. I'm Dave Duncan, and today we've got a guest in studio. We got Omar here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Glad to have you, and thanks for stopping in. So, I don't know. Do you use Macs at all, or what's kind of your daily driver?
Actually, I do use Mac. I switched to Mac back in 2010 and never looked back.
So, what do you think of this kind of move to getting rid of iTunes?
Obviously, being driven by all these Spotify and all these streaming services that are now already available. So it's making kind of like having your own music library a little bit started to becoming obsolete.
It was all this stuff that was kind of overloaded. iTunes started out being just, hey, a way to get music in and out of your iPod. And then they made it work with the phone. And it's like, well, as long as we're in the phone, let's also, back up all your files from your system, and just generally made it the way to access your iPhone, because they didn't want to, actually just put it on the file system where you could interact with it directly. It had to, go through their proprietary experience, frustratingly. And it's kind of outgrown it, and they've also had this seeming to me, I don't know how, do you use an updated Mac, or are you a couple of generations back?
My Macs are old, but I'm running on the one I'm using. I'm running the latest OS.
So have you gone to Catalina? The one that just came out?
No, I haven't got to that one. I'm the one before.
Yeah. So then this getting rid of iTunes is part of the new generation of stuff, and there's also a lot of movie files that I do video editing, and they said, oh, by the way, don't update Final Cut Pro to Catalina until you've converted all your source files, because they've dropped support for QuickTime, which was their format.
Yeah.
It's like everything. It was the format that everything worked on, and they're getting rid of that. So like that was crazy making, and I've just been that's the latest iteration for me of a process of like the last several generations. Every generation made the Mac worse for the things I was doing, from breaking these little kind of oddball third-party apps that, they're not going to come up with the newest version every 3 months or whatever, whenever Mac updates their stuff, and say, okay, now everything's got to be updated or it won't work. Kind of doing the opposite approach, because, Microsoft, I think maybe in your experience, very legacy oriented, right? It's like, if it worked 15 years ago, we still want it to work.
Yeah.
And Mac's like, we're a hardware company. We want you to buy new stuff, so get a new phone means you need new iTunes, which means you need the newest operating system, which means you need a new Mac, because maybe the Mac you've got doesn't even support the operating system you'd have to go to. So, and hey, I'm their sucker. I'm like getting ready to buy a Mac Mini on the newest operating system because I don't want to update anything. But so this, I think, is kind of a welcome step, though. iTunes was extremely overloaded, and now we're actually going to be able to, just go into the apps that we want to use and have the synchronization built into the Finder, which is, I think, where it's belonged for quite some time. And it sounds like, hey, we took, our panels straight from iTunes and stuck them in the Finder. So, it's going to be familiar to you if you can, locate where it is in the operating system. It's like, oh, now I know what I'm doing, because it's going to look fairly familiar. But I'm sure that will evolve too, in the next couple of editions, because they don't like leaving things alone. Let's go to another clip. This is from twit.tv. This week in Google 528. Dark mode sucks.
This is Twit.
Dark mode is for suckers.
Okay, I'm so happy you brought this up. I was wondering if it would end up making it in here. I'm curious too.
Yeah, we're starting with it because I'm vindicated.
Okay.
Gizmodo says it's all BS.
Okay, this guy on Gizmodo says it's all BS.
Yeah, this guy says it, but it's good enough for me.
He has some research.
Adam Angst at Tidbits explains in exhausting detail that except in extraordinary situations, dark mode is not easy on the eyes in any way.
Well, how is that?
Board Samantha Cole reports the research has found that people with astigmatism, light text on dark backgrounds aggravates the condition, making text harder to read. What's more, as Suzanne Mayer, a University of Passau researcher, said, who conducted multiple studies and found which design screws with our brain, in all the studies, participants were better performing in the positive polarity condition, otherwise known as not dark mode. They detected more errors and read faster when dark text was presented on light background rather than the reverse. So I just want this on the record that I'm not insane for my hatred for dark mode.
You hate it.
I'm not done. I'm not done. We're sticking with light mode. Light mode's the way to go. It's the way God made phones.
John, could you just kill the lights in here? It's too bright for me right now. It's far too bright. Thank you. This is what we need to do.
Thank you, John.
Oh, there we go. So I know Ant has some opinions. I'll just throw out the 2 times that I've really I like dark mode on Twitter, where reading comprehension doesn't really matter as much because it's very short.
Yeah.
And then I also like it when I am in a professional setting or a conference setting, and I'm trying to type without everybody else being really aware of what I'm typing and that I'm typing. And dark mode is awesome for that.
Yeah.
So those are my pro dark mode moments.
I appreciate dark mode when I am in a dark environment. I think that is a very honest application of why dark mode can be very useful. If I'm in a dark environment, if I pick up my phone off the bedside table or whatever and it's dark in the room and I look at it, it's a bright white, that does irritate my eyes.
Shocks you.
I mean, it's not discomfortable or uncomfortable, not discomfortable, uncomfortable,
That's the word.
But at the same time, a darker mode is more pleasing, so I can prefer it. Yeah.
Your eyes are smart. They figure it out.
I'm sure. But
So when I have a migraine, dark mode is the only way I can get online.
Pulling out the migraine card, are
yeah.
I'm pulling the migraine.
It's a thing.
I'm pulling the cranky old man card, Jeff. Come on. I got to do the migraine.
See,
it's a thing.
I battle with this, and I'm one of those people that see better at nighttime than I do in the daytime. And it's been that way for about as long as I can remember. As a matter of fact, just within the last hour, I was walking the hallway and I had on my sunglasses. And I had to think, take your sunglasses off.
You forgot that you were wearing them.
No. I want you to do the show in the sunglasses. This is your new look.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I would. But I really do.
You're the Anna Wintour
use.
of Twit.
I do get better use out of the dark mode on my eyes because of the sensitivity. I like having a better contrast when I look at the screen. And heck, even sitting in the office with Mr. Howell here.
Yeah,
when I get here before them most of the time, and the office is dark, and I'll have on one little lamp because that's enough for me to see.
Do you look at your dark mode with sunglasses on? Are you double dark mode?
I have.
Super duper dark
mode. Not on purpose, but I have.
All right, here's the next question. So when you're on a plane,
sunglasses.
There's a lot of fighting going on now. There's a lot of fighting going on these days on the rates on planes. And when I get on the plane, because I'm global services, you bow down before me. I get on the plane before the pilot does. I get on first.
Right.
I go to my seat on the aisle. I always raise the shades. I want the shades up. I can't stand when people the shades down. So are you a shades up or shades down person on planes?
Good question. Good question.
There's a good reason for this, though. I am a shades up for that, but that's because I am a aviation nerd. I love airplanes, so I'm always looking out with my sunglasses through those shades.
Yeah.
I'm a shades down, Jeff. I can't believe it. We don't agree on anything.
Shocking.
Surprise.
Again, for me, it mirrors my dark mode rationale. Like, it depends on the time of day. If it's daytime, I want the shades up. If it's nighttime, or if it's like early morning, that's probably the more applicable time. Like, if I, travel to the airport and it's like 5:30 in the morning and I have to catch a flight or whatever, and the sun's going to be come up and I do want to sleep a little bit, sure, shades down. That's fine.
But I'm also the same person that discussed last week that I wear my glasses just sparingly. Yeah. And it's clearly helped my eyes over the years because I don't have to wear them all the time the way most people
do. It's vanity. It's pure vanity. And
no, I don't wear my glasses all the time.
Not that you don't deserve it.
And it's because I hate having a filter between me and people I'm talking to.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know why. I always will take them off.
I cannot walk to the bathroom from bed without glasses on. I can't do anything without glasses on.
Wow.
Man. My eyes are probably about as bad as yours. Wow. It sounds like.
Man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. It's
All right. Well, I just want on the record here that
it's good.
Gizmodo says dark mode is for suckers.
And Andrew Couch says it, so we should all heed what he says.
That's it. I never quote Gizmodo, but now they're right.
Yeah, and I mean, a large part of what he's saying here is that it's a trend. Like, dark mode is a trend, therefore people like it because people like it. And I mean, there's probably a little bit of truth to that, actually.
Sheeples, dark mode sheeples.
But I know that I like it for reasons outside of that, too. I think at certain times of day, for me, it's more aesthetically pleasing to my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are people that are following the trend because they've heard about it. But again, there's people like me. It's just for comfort.
Yeah, comfort. Yeah. And some people will tout the battery savings and everything. Andrew makes the point, like, if you really added it up, you're probably not saving that much. A lot of dark mode is not true dark anyways. It's like a shade of gray, and you're still burning battery when you do that. So what are you really saving? And you have to be on the, an AMOLED display, so that you have to have the right display technology for that to even matter. So anyways, I don't know. If you like dark mode, now you have the option. At the end of the day, isn't it nice to have options?
Yes, it is.
Options are good.
All right.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Google, 528. Dark mode sucks. I'm Dave Duncan, and I'm joined today by my regular co-host, Nate Darnell.
Hey.
And we got a new guest in the studio today, Omar Quintero. Hey, how you doing, Omar?
I'm doing well.
All right. So, dark mode. Fans? Anti-fans?
I don't know one way or the other because I don't have any mode after 9 p.m. My mode is off.
Okay. So, I don't know. I find it a little relaxing to have a darker screen and just with some light writing on it, but apparently that's not what's best for your eyes, according to the latest from the experts who said that it was better the other way for a while. So.
According to experts or according to science?
Draw your distinctions there, sir.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what. Like one of the things that I'm looking at right now, outside of the so-called dark mode, is just the amount of time that I spend on the computer every single day, and just dealing with eye strain and blue light and all those things. Is getting lenses for my glasses that are blue light blockers.
Oh, nice.
To reduce some of the stress.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's what dark mode is kind of trying to emulate.
Yeah, and they also have. Dark mode is really kind of like a theme for the whole way the interface is laid out. So, like changing it to, from dark writing on a light background to light writing on a dark background. So once you've got everything lit up white, then it comes into play. Is this, how much blue is there in this white light I'm getting? And so they do have some, like the latest versions of the iOS stuff and Android also. They have specific modes that, like, okay, during nighttime hours, let's kind of have a filter over whatever the screen is normally doing at the operating system level that just like greatly reduces the blue in what you're seeing. So you're not going to get a true picture anymore, but theoretically it's not going to keep you up all night as much either. But and then dark mode is just like, okay, that completely aside, do you do light on black or black on white? And so I have there's a handicap mode in iOS that you can dig down, and I've redone all my devices so that triple click on the home button inverts the screen, and as a shortcut, and it inverts everything except photos. So you look at a web page, everything's inverted on it except for the pictures. Well, if you look at them specifically, if they're part of a page, then they invert with everything else. But as soon as you go specifically to a picture or to a video, the colors are normal. So that's been helpful to me, just because looking at a bright screen just gives me a headache.
I personally like the dark mode, and also you got to take into account that dark mode also provides more battery life. Helps with that.
Yeah, especially if you're on like an OLED screen, so where the pixels are actually off, as opposed to, okay, we're still going to light up the whole screen, but we're going to use LCD screens to, block out a part of it and make it look black. So yeah, that's becoming more of a thing, because you had these OLEDs for a long time. They kept saying, "Oh, it's right around the corner." I think for 10 years we've been hearing that, and now we're starting to actually get products out because it was just so hard. The quality control was such a problem. I think the defect rate was high enough that it wasn't practical to produce OLED products. And sell at a reasonable price. But if you had like really tiny screens or something, you could see some OLED stuff. Like I had a little Arduino thing that had an OLED screen. That was fun. Omar, doing contracting for IT through Incentric?
Yes.
Yeah. So what are some of the kind of issues you've run into, sort of myth versus reality, with people saying, "Oh, we need to be on the cloud"?
Well, the typical stories start with an executive who he'll hear all the buzzwords, and cloud's been actually a buzzword for quite a while. But when you have a large enterprise just making a move from legacy systems to a new kind of environment, it's not that easy. But you start with executive that wants to move. He wants to be in the forefront. He wants to be flag that I took my enterprise from point A to point B.
Sure.
They push for cloud, have kind of like twofolds. One specifically is to stop the ownership of data centers. You go back 20 years ago, basically you have multiple data centers everywhere, right? You can be a large organization and you have 200 sites, and pretty much every site have their own server.
And then the problem was you had to buy up to the capacity of your busiest moment.
Exactly. You have to buy to the capacity, and sometimes you have to actually, go through that process of predicting your future growth and kind of like have this refresh every 3-5 years to get up there.
Yeah. As your growth creeps up against the boundary of your technology, things get slower, and you're like, oh, you got to keep ahead of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then, there was a time when they start consolidating data centers. That was like a move of cost saving, of what have you. Then we get into virtualization, and then it's like, well, I don't need enough hardware. I can build more machines with less hardware. And now became the move, okay, if I have this enabled in the cloud, technically I can access from everywhere, and I don't even have to own the equipment, and I only buy as much as I actually need to use, right?
Yeah, so day to day, it's much more cost efficient and better performance, but Amazon goes down, everyone goes down.
Yeah, exactly. There's the twofold, right? You have a single point of failure or where the cyber attacks could happen, but at the same time, you only have one door to watch, too, instead of like multiple doors everywhere in your enterprise.
And you've got the advantage of, one of the largest teams for keeping your stuff online. I mean, expertise maybe you couldn't obtain or afford if you could even find the people for it.
Yeah, exactly. And then also you distribute the cost among, multiple clients and all that. Yeah. So then when the roadblocks start happening is first, you have legacy applications where they want to move to the cloud, but they haven't figured out how to, upgrade those applications to something that is more cloud friendly, or let's say. And then you have the other issue when you come, like, let's say, government, where there's certain information that you don't want to share or be hosted in the same place that is shared with everybody else, right?
Yeah, you might even have a legal obligation to keep it keep it a little more private.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of like legal things that comes into play, but
like if you're a lawyer or you're medical field or something. Yeah.
But part of that was resolved by this Amazon and Microsoft creating basically what they call the government cloud. So basically, it's a cloud system that is certified by the government and is only used by the government, and all the data is hosted in one place and it have to be within the boundaries of U.S.
Right. So normally they're part of the way they achieved a great cost and efficiency is just moving stuff freely to whatever servers were most available and closest to the points that we're drawing on it and so forth. And then the government says, well, we got certain standards that you're required to adhere to in order to do this. And so that Amazon just said, okay, well, we'll have a section that adheres to those standards and we'll be standards compliant, and then you can use us. So it's like the same standards you'd have to use if you were building it in-house.
Yeah, and when you look back, this process of creating that government cloud have gone through several iterations and pretty much started somewhere around 2014, 2012. So it's fairly recent. Now I think the ultimate roadblock is basically the legacy application, because governments are moving as many applications as they can, but they still have certain, especially when you come to agencies that are in the law enforcement, there's certain applications that have been used for collecting data that eventually are presented on cases and things that they do for regulatory reasons. And some of these systems have the biggest roadblock is, one part is budgeting, to able to have the side budget to move all these applications to something newer, or in other cases also the time frame that it takes to move this application and the data they have to move.
Right, to stay online during all this.
Yeah.
Well, have there been times where you had to say, because of this and this and this, you actually probably shouldn't be moving to the cloud?
There occasionally that comes, but right now there is no turning back. They are moving to the cloud. Yeah, it's more about like how fast you move.
Yeah, so everyone else does it, and so to keep up with them, you have to do it as well.
Yeah, and actually, the savings are there, obviously, but the slowdown becomes about, what applications they're moving or not, and how fast they can move to the cloud. So there is no turning back. That's where the direction is going. It's just like kind of when there was the move from Windows, 2000 to the newer Windows or any changes that were kind of like a step up in technology. When you come to big enterprise, especially in the government that have a lot of regulations, it becomes like, okay, we have to get there. It's just how long it's going to take us to get there.
Now, sometimes they come up these security flaws, several lately, where you could escape the virtual container you were in.
Security has always been a problem, especially in the move to the cloud at the beginning, because the idea and everything was there, and that's why they created this program to kind of like certify cloud providers, and it's going through several iterations. And I can tell you, like Microsoft, they started with they created a government cloud, and then eventually that evolved into different layers of security in the government cloud, and that's been happening as things progresses. So
there's also been kind of a move to getting off the computers and getting onto tablets and phones, kind of the bring your own device kind of movement. You were talking a little bit about that. What's been happening?
Well, it's again the same thing about executive first. Right now, when you go to the higher levels of management,
He's got it on his cell phone. I want that.
Yeah, exactly. Why do I need to carry a laptop when I can carry this nice iPad or a Google tablet? So yeah, there is a big move to that. It's mostly about mobility and make less things. I mean, there's twofold, because obviously if you have some laptops in the business, when you come to business type of laptops, are more expensive than, let's say, some tablets. But the biggest thing is about mobility, right? Like being able to work from anywhere, however you want it. That I think is like the next barrier they're trying to break. Usually start on the upper management, because they are the people who are less likely to be sitting on a desk in front of a desktop or a lap or using a laptop, but they need to be able to access the systems they need to access, or email and things like that on the road. It's easier for them because most of the upper management, what they use is mostly the email, right? So you can pretty much convert them fairly quickly. Now when you start going down the layers, then you have to enable all the applications you have into the mobile devices. So one way to do it is, one way they have done with certain applications, because the application is enabled on a browser, then you can kind of like sort of have that enabled in your laptop. But
yeah, browser has kind of surprisingly over the last few years become kind of its own operating system. It's like if you've got something that works in Chrome, it doesn't matter if you're on Mac or PC or Linux.
Yeah, exactly. But not all applications work that way. And then you come down to, let's say, you have a person who have to inspect, I don't know, wineries, right? And they have certain applications that they use to inspect wineries. And those applications might not be working that well on a browser. They haven't been enabled for mobile devices. And then the other thing is, like, once you are out there in certain areas, you have no Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, you have no connectivity, so that creates a problem. But mainly a lot of the applications that in these large enterprises are using, they might be browser enabled, but they're not really mobile friendly. So not all of them works well. And then you have to add another layer, which is the security layer. Right now, when it comes to laptops or desktop, there's a lot of security incorporated, like the use of PIF cards. Basically, you need to have a card that have a code physically attached to the device, and that way you can access the device. And when it comes to tablets, they're not there yet.
Oh, right. So it like pretends to be a keyboard or something, and you trigger it, and it sends in some one-time password or something like that? Or
no, you actually have to insert the card into a reader and then type a password that you have.
Oh, okay. In order to access what's on there?
Yeah.
Oh.
And the car actually have all your biometrics and stuff and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's probably more in the business space, because I haven't really seen that.
Yeah, that's absolutely in the enterprise space, especially government.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, let's see. I guess the thing that would be useful for people to know, that if they're kind of, what's a sign that someone's maybe at a point where they need to, kind of, they've gotten big enough that they need to start worrying about this, and how do they go about finding someone that can help them get onto the cloud and move their applications and such?
I think in terms of size, there's no specific size. Actually, the smaller you are, the better for you to move right away.
Really?
Because you have less things to migrate.
That's true.
Yeah, and also it becomes, right now, any small enterprise, you absolutely have, nowadays, like, for instance, like in Centric, we have, everything is hosted, everything is on the cloud. We use, like, Box for our content management and file archive, box.com. We use Google for all our email and
yeah. Google for Enterprise and such.
Yeah, so I believe right now any small business or small enterprise, commercial or government, there is absolutely no reason for you to own your own data center.
Yeah, once you've got this set up correctly, you're not relying on the paperboy to update your computers anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, it's in the cloud. It's taken care of. Anything needs to be updated, customer service in the cloud will probably help you through it.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing anybody on an enterprise needs to worry about right now is like applying patches, upgrading hardware, or, upgrading operating system. You got to go into the application layer. Basically, that's where you want to worry about.
That sounds good. Okay, I think we may need to turn the station to all pads and cloud.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this next clip from Twit might be, something that I've been hearing about coming down quite a while, and I always thought of it as an unqualified good thing, and there are some gotchas to it. So here's a piece from twit.tv from This Week in Enterprise Tech 359, Securing DNS.
This is Twit.
Now, Let's Encrypt has had a significant impact on the internet by allowing pages who couldn't usually afford to secure their sites with TLS encryption can now do so for free. In fact, there's stats showing that almost 80% or more of page loads these days are actually encrypted with Let's Encrypt. But there's still tons of other hurdles we have to get over in order to plug those holes in the internet infrastructure, like DNS. Now, the system that looks up your site's IP address when the type of site's name and when you actually type your site's name into a browser, it remains unprotected by encryption. Now, this means that anyone along the path from your internet to your DNS resolver can actually collect information about which sites you visit. Now, this means that even eavesdroppers can still profile your online activity and make a list of sites you visited or a list of who visits a particular site. Now, malicious DNS resolvers or on-path routers can also tamper with your DNS requests, blocking you from accessing sites or even routing you to fake versions of the site you requested. Now, you're probably remembering the discussion we had way back about DNS over HTTPS and how Google plans to test DNS over HTTPS in its Chrome 788 Canary builds. Now, along with technologies like TLS 1.3 and encrypted SNI, actually will help with privacy issues, but there's still some major hurdles to get over. Now, for instance, many internet service providers and participants in the standardization process have expressed strong concerns about the development of the protocol. ISPs are also concerned that DOH will complicate the use of captive portals. Now, some countries like the UK use DNS to police what sites people can surf, and this can actually cripple their efforts. Now, members of civil society have also expressed concerns over plans for browsers to automatically use specific DNS resolvers, overriding the resolver configured by the operating system. Now, for this movement to work, DOH must focus on the rights of the user. In fact, browsers must be transparent about who will gain access to DNS request data and give users an opportunity to choose their own resolver. Now, ISPs and other operators of public light should implement support for encrypted DNS to help preserve a decentralized system in which users have more choices of whom they rely on for various services. So basically, we're saying that there is a long road ahead, and you better be ready for a DOH marathon rather than a sprint.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Enterprise Tech 359, talking about securing DNS. I'm Dave Duncan. I'm joined here by Nate Darnell and Omar Quintero. We've all had these, the little padlock on your browser saying your actual connection to the site you've connected to is encrypted. But before you make that connection, your browser on your behalf has to go out to the DNS server that's been configured by your local tech guy if you're in a business, or usually by your internet provider otherwise, and just say, hey, I'm looking for Microsoft.com. What's the 4-number IP address of that thing? 4 numbers between 0 and 255. That's the actual IPv4 address. And it looks that up and it says, okay, now it sends out the request over the internet to that number, and then it hands over the web address you gave it as kind of an argument to that server and says, hey, I'm looking for Microsoft.com and this page. So that last part is encrypted most of the time now, thanks to things like Let's Encrypt, that's made it free, really, for people to provide that kind of encrypted web support, which has been a nice thing. before that, it was like everyone was just sending their stuff around like postcards in the clear, and just like, oh, here's my stuff, and everyone in between, most notably your internet service provider, could see every bit of traffic going back and forth, and they were under no particular restraint not to share that information in aggregate to anyone who just loves collecting data, and for marketing purposes or otherwise. And they were a little annoyed to some degree when SSL and its successors, TLS, shut people out of the actual traffic. But as we've been learning the last few years, it's all about the metadata, right? It's like if we know that you're going to to some medical site for cancer, we don't need to see what page you go to on it. It's like, okay, someone in your house has got cancer, or you're worried about cancer. Or your video browsing habits of adult material or whatever. They know where you're going and when you're going, and secure. Even when this other stuff is secure, the DNS lookup of how to get to those sites has been flying around postcard style, very much open and free. And what they're saying is, hey, let's some of the browsers are kind of developing this and kind of forcing the protocol from the bottom up and saying, okay, well, our browser at least is going to do secure DNS inquiries this way instead of just using the open DNS system. And the downside of this generally I think it's a good move, but there are a couple of downsides. Like one is, if you go into a hotel or something and you're getting on their, or any place where they're offering just open free Wi-Fi, they might have something called captive portal where no matter what address you try to go to, it goes instead to this screen put up by the local Wi-Fi provider saying, hey, you've logged into the hotel's Wi-Fi, these are our terms of service, please agree to this to continue. And then it gives you a cookie, and then the next time you go to try to go to a website, it sends you to the actual website. But to do that, it has to be able to see your DNS queries and alter them, and say, like, no matter where you're trying to go to, you're going to go to the hotel's captive portal thing. And if it's secure, they can't do that. So I think that's what's sometimes known as contempt of business model. I'm abusing this certain security flaw and to facilitate my business or whatever it is I want to do, and therefore you shouldn't make the standard secure because it'll mess up how I've been doing this in a real easy way.
It's like when you start looking for, a door in Home Depot, next thing you know, start showing all the doors available for different vendors. So that might be a downside.
Firefox and Chrome have both been implementing some version of this in their own way. The ISPs have been pushing back and making a lot of noise, mostly false, I think, just to, oh, this is so bad for you, and really means it's bad for them because they've been, sucking up this data that they haven't, with, kind of with the repeal of network neutrality, they're free to sell your data to whoever they want to if that's their terms of service. So, taking that kind of, from their point of view, aggressive step of, it's like, well, I'm going to encrypt my stuff then, and you can't see it. And they say, no, don't do that. Please come back. So it'll be interesting. And whenever you go to a secure DNS provider, whoever that is, they're now in the same position that the ISP was in that in order to process your DNS request, they decode it and pass it on to the appropriate domain response name server. So the complaint, the kind of half-hearted complaint that the ISPs have been raising is, well, the browsers just want to collect, or they want to send everybody, their business partner, Cloudflare or whatever, they just want all that data that you were giving to us, for nefarious purposes or whatever. And so I think the Chrome approach has been to see if the domain involved has a DNS over secure HTTP, to see if they have a DOH style provider of DNS, and then use that, and then otherwise not force it. And I think Firefox was doing the partnership with Cloudflare, but they've got things in their control panel where you can control whether that's used or not. So it's there's been some scaremongering on it. I think overall it's good, although the captive portal thing did give me pause. I was like, oh yeah, there are some people that are going to rely on that. Overall, in the security, personal security versus, our ability to protect you by fiddling with your traffic, I think you got to go with the personal security and empowerment of the end individual. It's really intrusive to do it any other way. Someone just like walked up to you on the street and just started, like running block for you through the crowds. It's like, I've decided to protect you. It's like, buddy, get away. I don't know you. It's like, who's protecting me from you? So, I treat those kinds of responses a little bit skeptically. All right. Well, one last little blip before we go here. This is a piece from This Week in Enterprise Tech 361, talking about the new buzzword, serverless.
This is Twit.
Well, the shift to serverless is real. Cloud-native applications are and will continue to be made up of heterogeneous microservices deployed across hybrid clouds. But while most organizations' current server types lean toward VMs and bare metal, their choices are predicted to shift to containers and serverless platforms within the next 2 years. A research group called the Enterprise Strategy Group, or ESG, their analyst report, researchers found that 34% of respondents use serverless extensively, while 18% currently use serverless on a limited basis, 16% plan to start using serverless within the next 1 to 2 years, and 28% are currently evaluating serverless. Only 3% of companies out there don't have any plans involving serverless at all. The drivers for serverless functions, well, those include improved security, network-based tech to secure against attacks, security functionality embedded in source code containing serverless function calls, and faster time to market when developing new applications. Now, with all this, there are security concerns. The API vulnerabilities are the top worry when considering serverless functions, followed by exposure of secrets, API calls that result in unencrypted data transfer, escalated privileges, and use of unapproved APIs. Now, how are people doing this? DevSecOps is emerging as the primary means of protecting cloud-native applications, with more than half of respondents incorporating security into DevOps. Another 20% plan to do so. However, as of right now, only 8% of organizations are currently securing 75% or more of their cloud-native apps using DevSecOps practices.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Enterprise Tech 361, talking about kind of the coming new buzzword of serverless. And, just kind of like the cloud, it's a little misleading. Like, the cloud is really just servers. It's just server-based computing. It's the new friendly version of it. And serverless, it's still stuff on other people's computers. It's just kind of abstracting away, worrying about, I'm on a computer with this processor and this operating system and all this stuff. It's really connecting to specifically a function. Like, you basically abstract out a program with an application program interface, and you just talk to it like a program instead of as a part of a larger server. So, and that allows you to kind of break down some of the race conditions that happens when you're on a server and trying to get processes to interact. It's like, no, I'm just interacting with this program and I'm interacting with this program, and it just happens to be those connections are happening over the net instead of within the computer on your desktop. So it's a lot of these words, it's like they try to make this a big deal, and it's really not. It's just
well, it's the marketing department kicking in, having to create some new drive, instead of just describing the cloud as next generation mainframe technology, which is essentially what it is.
That's so good, right?
I mean, other people, and there are some minor differences, but in the big scheme of things, the big concept is still the same. It's just that now they're able to run it a lot farther based on all the infrastructure they built over the past 40 years.
Yeah, and the networks are really fast
from the mainframe itself. Same thing. I think anyone who has a discussion about these newer technologies, it would really do them good to really learn the basic fundamental develop a core concept of databases, object-oriented databases, serial databases, all those things, which nobody's ever really going to do. But if you have that basic understanding, then you have a clear understanding too that, look, what's happening now is basically that object-oriented approach. Where you don't have just one database that you're pulling from. Now you've got several different tables and databases spread across a couple of different machines that one application is reaching out to kind of compile it all.
And maybe those are hidden from you. It's like that's right. You have this application that you interface to that database through, and you don't touch the database.
That's right. But to that end, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just getting terrifying to me because, it's while I understand the reduced overhead, especially in terms of manpower to maintain systems and handing a lot of these things over to virtualized servers and so on and so forth, and then even away from servers. The reality is that things are becoming increasingly more interconnected and complex in these connections, and when they're running, it's fantastic. When they're not running and they're broken,
you can't do anything.
Not only can you not do anything, trying to walk it backwards to understand where the break is happening and to get it fixed, it becomes increasingly more difficult. It's a lot easier when it's actually inside your cubicle or your office, when you can reach down to that machine and pull something apart.
It's like, I got a hard drive from last week. I'll just pop that in.
Right, exactly. And so that's the flip side of going this direction. Now, there's an argument that handing over these services to Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, so on and so forth, because they already have billions of dollars invested in these server, tanks and everything else. The reality is that every single one of them has encountered an outage. It's not widely published. You got to dig for it, but all of them have. And when that happens, then, your services go down, and frankly speaking, customers don't care. They're there to get their information or their product, and it's your responsibility to make sure they get it. Your hands are largely tied. And so I'm still dragging my feet on a lot of this stuff with an understanding that most of it's futile.
Well, and the part of the point is let other people do the beta testing, right? Because these bugs will get worked out. It's like, let someone else do it.
Well, I mean, there's a belief that they will get worked out, but let's take a couple of steps back. And how many of these small office, home office routers have had bugs in them which have been persistent for well over 15 years, and they're still out there, right?
Well, and the problem with that, though, is that those systems are outside the control of anyone with the competence to notice and or do anything about it.
Right. So I guess my fundamental argument simply goes back to the idea that as Omar, you're talking about when you were beginning your conversation earlier, you were talking about the executives who generally are schooled in the area of business and finance, but generally clueless when it comes to technology. And I will say that having worn both pairs of shoes.
Absolutely.
And they will make executive decisions with an understanding that everything is just going to be like this golden cakewalk and it's just going to work the way it's supposed to. And they're generally not very familiar with the amount of baling wire, duct tape, Bondo, and hair pulling that's required of the IT teams behind the scenes to make this stuff magical, right?
Okay. Yeah. All right, and Nate, let's give Omar a little chance to respond to that. You've encountered this sort of thing in the field, so what would you say to that when they have those kind of problems?
I will say, like, when he described the executive, basically they only know when things don't work, when they don't, but they don't know all the effort it takes, like he said, all the patching and bandaging around behind the scenes that they don't know about it. So, yeah, and to his point, the other thing is, like, a lot of things are becoming more interconnected, and there's all this push, especially from the marketing departments of all these vendors, on, you got to go to the cloud, you got to do IoT and all these things, but nobody's looking too much at the security layers and the implication of, like, data leaks or, like, privacy and all these things that becomes more like when they start happening, you find about it, and we go back and say, hey, we got to fix this. And he's talking about outages. Like, we actually experienced an outage with Box.com, so they're not highly publicized. They probably never tell you what exactly happened.
But you're able to fix them, though.
Yeah, I mean, you have no access to your data.
Are you able to overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, eventually the vendor overcame those, but you don't know exactly what happened.
Right? All right. Well, you've done it again. You've spent an hour talking technology with Dave, Nate, and Omar. Hope you'll join us to continue this conversation next Wednesday and every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock on Northwest Tech Show.
you.